Tom Webster's next move, the latest from our daily newsletter at podnews.net. Last month, Tom Webster announced he was to leave Edison Research. So where's he going?
On June 1st, I am joining Sounds Profitable as partner, teaming up with Brian Barletta to help build something to make the podcasting space better for everyone.
Writing in Sounds Profitable, he outlines the future to share content, research, and run events and advisory services to help set the course for the future of the audio business. To learn more, you should subscribe to Sounds Profitable. It's at soundsprofitable.com. The 6th annual IAB US podcast advertising revenue study was published. It shows US podcast ad revenue growth increasing dramatically during 2021, hitting $1.4 billion. Revenues are forecast to hit $4.2 billion by 2024. The report also notes a dramatic shift to dynamically inserted advertising, which now accounts for 84% of revenue, and a growth of pre-roll ads, which are now responsible for a third of income. We've updated our podcast market data slides page with the new headline figure. You'll find that linked in our show notes and our newsletter at podnews.net. Podcast revenues at Odyssey were up 37% year-on-year, said CEO David Field in an investor call. Downloads for high-margin local podcasts are up 50%, he said. Wondery is streaming some shows in Dolby Atmos. You'll need to be a Wondery Plus subscriber to listen. It's claimed it's the first podcast experience in Dolby Atmos. Now, Kurt Coe's Solar was mastered in Dolby Atmos and was released on March 30th. And JBM launched the first Dolby Atmos-equipped studio in the Middle East at the beginning of last month. There's also a Dolby Atmos Experience sound studio at the podcast show in London in a few weeks. Spotify has published its Swedish podcast report 2022. 54% of Swedish people from 18 to 79 listen to podcasts regularly. 60% say they listen on Spotify. Say Spotify. SR Play is number 2, which is a Swedish radio app, and Apple Podcasts is number 3. Less than a week before Radio Days Europe starts, Radio Days Asia has announced that it will be in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia on September the 6th to the 7th. It'll be the third event with 2 parallel tracks of sessions, including a high number of speakers about podcasting in the region. Early bird tickets are available now, and I'll be there. An audiobook startup launched last year by 3 founders of Acast, Sesame, is to move into podcasts, allowing listeners to buy individual podcasts without a monthly subscription. In India, Binance has launched its cryptocurrency podcast in 5 Indian regional languages. Originally in Hindi, the show is now available in Gujarati, Bangla, Telugu, Marathi and Tamil. Production company Audio Always has launched Manchester Amplified, a free podcast production and mentoring scheme for arts and culture organisations in Greater Manchester in the UK. And there's a new podcast studio in Washington, DC at Penn Social, which is reopening after closing in November 2020. There's also a live concert hall and coffee shop in the venue. And in People News, Marissa Rives has been promoted to Director of Sports Podcasts at SiriusXM. It's her 12th year with the company. Catherine Hutchison has joined Acast UK Plus as Group Business Director. She joins from a career in radio sales in the UK, including Virgin Radio, Absolute Radio and Jack. I've worked with her and she's super excellent. Nick Southwell-Keeley has joined Sony Music Entertainment as Vice President of Podcast Advertising Sales. He joins from Acast. Steph Behrens-Sanderson is now US Head of Branded Podcasts for Sony Music Entertainment. She joins from Meet Cute. And Avishai Artsy and Jonquilin Hill are joining Vox Media as Senior Producers. Artsy moves from life as a freelancer. Hill joins from WAMU. And in podcast news, Todd Cochran's Geek News Central hits episode 1600 this week. One of the first podcasts in the world. Its first episode was October the 9th, 2004, just a few weeks after the word podcast began to be used. Suave has won a Pulitzer Prize for its reporting. The podcast from Futuro Media and PRX is a story about juveniles sentenced to spend their whole life in prison. And a new season of StoryCorps began last week, hosted by Camilla Kashani. The podcast features stories of people who helped others, who've reached out a hand even when they didn't have to. It's described as a love letter to those whose generosity has had a lasting effect. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.